Welcome back to another episode of On the House with Spartan Invest. Today, I'm really excited. We've got two special guests joining us from the Birmingham location or the Birmingham market. They are seasoned real estate agents, brokers, educators. I've got Jason Bonner and Kimberly Benefield. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having us.
We're happy to be here. Thank you.
So really quick, just tell me a little bit about yourselves. Just, how long you've been in the industry and what you're currently doing right now.
Ladies first.
Well, thank you for having us again, Lindsay. I am an independent broker owner, so I have a company here, a boutique brokerage. We have about 55 agents. I'm also an educator, so I teach pre-license, post-license, CE classes, and those are two of the biggest responsibilities that I have. So I've been in the real estate industry for about 20 years, and I love all aspects of it. I love all of my agents. I love teaching. I remember what it was like to be new. I love investors because y'all keep the market steady.
There you go.
So, and aren't you a member or on the directors of the Birmingham MLS as well, or tell me what that is?
Yes, I'm on the board of directors on my second term for the Birmingham Association of Realtors. And I was president last year of the Alabama Real Estate Educators Association. And I'm on the board of that now.
You see, you left all that out. That's great stuff.
Well, thank you very much.
She's trying not to make me look bad with all these things, with all these titles and all these fancy things.
She was looking out for you, Jason. Well, tell us about you.
I know. Well, Jason Bonner, and I've been in the business probably, I guess now a little over 20 years, right at 20 years. Currently, I am associate broker and team leader at Exit Realty Birmingham. So I do a lot at that office, and also the founder of RAMP, which is Realtors Achieving Maximum Productivity, now co-owner of RAMP. Kimberly and I just partnered up this year with RAMP. And so that's the main thing I'm doing. I also run a real estate team at Exit Realty Birmingham called Empire Home Team, where we work with a lot of investors actually, and just do some just regular old real estate as well. So I've just done a whole bunch of different things in my 20 years. So this is about as streamlined as I've been yet. So
you guys have both worn a lot of hats in real estate and done multiple things, worked with owner occupants, worked with investor clients. What would you say, or which role do you think has taught you the most about how investors and agents can best work together?
It's not a role per se. I truly, truly, truly believe this, and anyone that knows me hears me say this all the time. I have found that my best relationships with investors and working with investors come from networking. Just going to events and getting involved, not just going to an event and saying, hey, but following up, doing a coffee or a lunch, and really developing that relationship. Because I believe no matter what role you're in, and even if it's not just an investor, whether it's another industry professional or a trade or something like that, I just believe developing a relationship is always going to be the best way to have a successful, journey with these folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, being a qualifying broker has taught me a lot about the entire industry, investors in general, because I get lots of contracts across my desk all the time. And I see the way that contracts are negotiated. I see how creative financing comes into play. It really lets me in on the market trends. The main thing, probably the main role, was being an investor myself and a home buyer myself. One interesting thing, I had sold hundreds of houses before I ever bought one. I had sold hundreds of houses. I opened up a real estate company. I married a man that had a house. I never bought a house. And so when I bought a house myself, I was like, you know what? This is a little bit nerve-wracking. I see why people about it. And I was like, I can't believe I opened up my own company, never even bought a house, but sold hundreds of them. And the other thing is, we would go to the closing table. We would see the money that sellers left with or buyers had to bring. When I started investing myself, that taught me a lot about some of the clients that I work with. So where buying a house and selling a house since then, that was a little nerve-wracking. But what was most nerve-wracking of all was when I decided to invest a house. Like I've currently got a flip now waiting to sell. And that was one of the roles. When you put yourself into that situation of a role that you're uncomfortable with, you learn a lot. And I think that makes creating win-win situations more important because you've actually been in each one of those roles. So, being a qualifying broker, that was one thing, but just the real world experience of investing and buying and selling, you forget how people feel. And it's very much emotional,
Yeah.
And I would definitely echo that. Me not being an investor, but knowing Kimberly very well, and literally that's my wheels were spinning when you were saying all that, and I was hoping you were going to say it. But I mean, I've always thought and I've always heard that the best training is on the job training. What they used to call it, OJT. So when you experience something, you definitely learn it. And I don't mean just learn it from all the things to do, but the things not to do, because you feel the pain. You experience the wins and losses in doing that, and that's always the best way to learn. Is to experience it. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's really, really, really good.
It's one thing to learn it, it's another thing to live it.
Exactly.
And that's where you really get the training. So.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and then you're able to pass on some of the negative experiences and some of the positive experiences with what you've done in real estate to investors that you might be working with, or to owner occupants. Something that never happened that may have happened at your property that you purchased to flip. Like, hey, make sure we're checking this, or hey, take this into consideration. You're just able to pass on a lot more education to those that you work with. And you guys spend a ton of time on education, on educating real estate agents and working with vendors, home inspectors, et cetera, et cetera. What would you guys say are some of the newer topics or maybe hot button issues that agents are being trained on, or may have a lot of questions about, that also may pertain to investors or may not? That was a really long question. I can break that down if I need to, but that was very,
good.
very,
if
very
I forget
long.
part of it, she can pick up the slack, or you can remind us of what part 2 and 3 and 4 were. But essentially, in somewhat of a nutshell, as I mentioned, I mean, I've taught a lot of CE classes, and last year I did a whole lot. It was a CE renewal year, but in the midst of the year last year, we had a real hot topic come up, which was the NAR settlement. And so that is one of the things that no matter what class, I could have been teaching a CE class on underwater basket weaving, and people would have been like, oh, what about the NAR settlement? What are you doing here or there? So it didn't matter what I was teaching. The questions were there. And I had CE classes, like literally the majority of the class ended up being talking about that. So that was a huge hot topic. Segueing or moving that into this year, it's still a hot topic. It's still out there. But I guess the biggest thing that happened this year is originally when all this came out, of course, commissions became compensations, and the seller needed to be explained, okay, how that works, and are they going to offer it, to the buyer's agent and everything like that. But along the way, that part, it streamlined things. It really, really, really did. I think it got things back to where they should have been, in my opinion. But the one thing that most agents didn't like is that you had to have a buyer sign buyer's agency of some sort of agency, some form of agency, before you could even show them a house.
Right.
And that we felt like that pressured buyers. And that's the last thing we want to do is pressure them right out of the gate, especially first time you're even showing them a house. But that was changed. Governor Ivey did change that this year. So now you no longer have to have buyer's agency before showing a house. I mean, there's other documents you need, but you don't have to have that. So they're not pressured to say they're going to use you at that first before that first showing.
So that was and the form that you're referring to is the buyer agency where compensation has to be disclosed prior to the first showing, right? Like it's where you
Correct. And
make
they
the
were, yeah.
compensation.
And they were also, the buyer was actually agreeing to use you and single agency and everything like that as well. When in all honesty, they might not have really even known you at that point,
Mm-hmm.
because they're wanting to go see a house and, literally you're having to say, okay, before you see this, you need to sign all this paperwork.
Yeah.
And so it just put them under a lot of pressure. We'd like the opportunity to do a buyer's consultation, develop a relationship. That's just how this business should work, in my opinion. So I feel like that kind of put a damper on that. Couple other things, and I'll turn it over to Kimberly. Hot topics from last year and now big time into this year is technology. Just as technology and even social media and everything just continues to change and get better and better and better and better and better and more important to use. And the next thing, you already know what I'm going to say, is AI. AI has become a big part of not just real estate, but all industries, and everybody wants to know how to best use it. And what we're putting together, because we're actually going to do a class on this, we're in process of writing one, is not just the best way to use AI in real estate, but in my opinion, even more importantly, is what not to do. And that's just very important because you can't just let it do all the work for you.
Right.
But there are some benefits in this business of using AI. And so I would say technology, AI, and the NAR settlement, that would be my three. What about you?
Yeah, I think you took all the good answers.
Yeah,
That's what I tried to do. I give you the hard part because you're all past presidents and all this fun stuff.
No, I think that that's true. AI is probably the hottest topic right now. Everyone's wanting to know how it can make your job easier. Everyone was thinking, it's gonna take away realtors. It's gonna take away everything, and that's just not true. But AI and investors and realtors, we are using it to determine market trends on data analytics. What's going to be high yield properties? Everyone is using it like that. They're even using it for marketing descriptions. I mean, AI can even, create a PowerPoint for you and keep you from being lonely. I just heard something about that on the news the other day. So I think AI is, it's going to be smarter than humans, and everyone was scared of it. But I think it will help investors, to determine market trends and different things like that. But it's never going to take the human element out of it.
Better not.
So
It won't.
I think no, absolutely not. But I think you can't be totally scared of it. You've got to embrace a little bit of it, so you know what's coming. But that's been a hot topic. Multi-use developments. When COVID happened, there was a lot of commercial buildings that became vacant and are still vacant, and some of my favorite shopping malls are gone. And so I think that creates a lot of opportunities for investors to create some multi-use spaces. And so investors that may have just been focusing on single family homes, they thought, I'm going to focus on single family, then I'm going to move to apartments one day. Well, you can go from single family to apartments to multi-use and create these huge multi-use complexes, and even workspaces. There's a new one in Birmingham, which I know a lot of your clients are on the West Coast. We didn't have a lot of workspaces where there are coffee shops and workspaces and these 24/7 things in our area.
Right.
But it's coming, and I think that it's just opened up a wild world of investment opportunities on things that it was sad, all the malls closing and people working from home. But there's a lot more vacant properties that investors can take advantage of.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like Jason was saying, that and still eco-friendly properties. People are concerned about that. Not just everyone's going green. It's just the economy is pretty volatile and has been for quite a while. It's not just the price of eggs, it's just the cost of living. And when you can make your home more sustainable, I think sustainability by more sustainable, it's also more affordable.
Mhm.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that's what
That's a really good
people,
point. And that's not something that's very prominent in Alabama as
right.
well as it is in other states. So I can see a lot of growth opportunity in the Southeast that has not been predominantly using solar energy to power properties. I can definitely see a shift in that being a pretty hot topic just to help
Yes.
on the affordability side. That's
Yeah.
really interesting that you're talking about AI and its use. And again, you're absolutely right in that it's not going to be the complete elimination. It is going to hurt some industries just like every other tech does. And because we were already shifting away from your big malls, Amazon was already killing that industry years before COVID. COVID just expedited it, probably about 10-15 years.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about AI and its use, when you're educating real estate agents, what are you telling them that is the kind of yeses and nos? Because again, you've got to AI is all based on your commands. So you can get it to write marketing descriptions, but you've got to make sure that none of those descriptions affect any kind of fair housing violations and stuff
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
that. So you still have to be cognizant of everything when using AI. What are you telling real estate agents is the best use when either evaluating deals or generating rate of returns to use AI?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll comment on that first is you actually just said it in what you were saying is with AI, you've got to be very specific. So you can actually put, I want a property description on this, not violating any fair housing laws and, uh, you know, uh, following, real estate law and everything like that. So you've got to be not only specific about what you want it to provide, but also saying those things like about the laws and about the different things like that. And one of the key things and we were just in an instructor training last week, and the guy doing the training echoed it, and he's a tech trainer. Is you can't let it do all the work for you. It's okay to use. And he said it's okay sometimes if it's 90% AI and 10% you. But that 10% you is not to copy and paste, to make sure to review it, to make sure to go through every bit of it, read it, don't get lazy, double check it, because sometimes depending on what version you're using or a paid version or non-paid version, some of that stuff's 2-3 years old that's in there. So making sure it's current information that you're actually, that it's providing to you. So.
Yeah, I think that that's very true. The main things that we were seeing were fair housing violations and different things like that. Um, it's a real time saver. I mean, even as instructors, it can help us prepare outlines and different things like that. But you do have to go back and check it. But the one thing that I think with AI, everyone's acting like it's so new, and it is in a sense, but I think of AI like I think of realtor.com and Zillow and Redfin. It's about algorithms and analytics. It's not going to take away the human element.
Yeah.
So sometimes investors, even, and I love investors, but sometimes investors in outside states, they'll be, well, Zillow says this, Redfin says
Mm-hmm.
this. Those are algorithms. That's artificial intelligence in a sense.
It is.
They don't realize that real estate is hyper local, and
It
it's
is
also
very
in most
hyper
of.
local. And I think Zillow kind of showed and learned that lesson. What was it, four
Yes, I
years
think
ago
so
when
too.
they used those algorithms to go into hundreds of different markets and buy up a ton of single family homes based on their own algorithms on what that property was worth, and it blew up. They could not
Mhm.
sell them because what it cannot tell you is that that particular house, you have got to take the overall market value down because it's right beside a train that goes by 4 times a day. You know
Yep.
what I mean? It's like it just is not necessarily going to be able to tell you those things. And yes, AI, as it evolves, it's going to get better, but there is just still such a human element to being
Mhm.
boots on the ground. And you've seen the Zillows and the realtor and the open doors that have had a lot of issues. They are definitely pulling back and ensuring that they have a boots on the ground person. I think Open Door
Right.
prior to, you just had to send a video
Mhm.
to sell your
Yep.
house and they would buy it. And now it's like, nope, they're sending a human out there to walk the property. You can no longer just submit a video and get an offer. So I think that you're absolutely right. And those larger companies are proving that point by backing off and just how important it is to have the boots on the ground. Sorry, we could talk forever on that. Like
I 100% agree with you, and I love that investors invest, from the East Coast, from the West Coast, but they need to do it with a company like yours that is boots on the ground. If it's turnkey, you've been inside it, you've seen it, you've smelled it, you've got the feeling of it.
mhm.
You've seen the house next door to it and across and across the street. And real estate is so hyper local in Birmingham. I mean, it can be street by street.
Yep.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
it just can be like that. So, I mean, it's just very important. I don't think it's going to, it's not going to, it doesn't have the empathy and the compassion and, just the five senses that humans do. It's never going to replace it. You can use it as a tool, and you better, because you'll be left behind.
Absolutely.
But-
Absolutely.
But there is a checks and balances system, and the whole world would be a better place if there was more checks and balances. I'm not even talking about the government
I
here.
was about to say, we still talking about real estate, and we still talking.
I could go on and on, like she said.
Yeah, no, that's just something that, we talk about all the time. We have investors that come to us that they're like, hey, can you take on this property? I bought it, sight unseen and from somebody else. And we're just like, oh, goodness gracious. I'm so sorry, but we can't. It just needs too much, or it's in a terrible area. We don't feel comfortable sending our team members there, except, we just have to have those conversations a good bit. So that's very sound advice. Would you say that you're seeing I want to talk a little bit about the market right now. Are you seeing sellers panic right now? We're not quite to a full 6-month inventory on the MLS, but we're definitely a lot further and in available inventory in our markets than we were compared to 2 years ago. So what are you seeing from sellers, buyers, just in general in Birmingham?
So what I'm seeing just from general sellers and buyers, of course, is when the market shifted and interest rates went up. Of course, we had the boom. Everybody's heard of that and probably sick of hearing about it. And us in real estate honestly aren't fans of that. I'd rather just see a steady interest rate.
Absolutely.
But I will tell you, usually after something like that, there's not necessarily always a crash, but there's a drop. And so where that affects everybody is not just buyers, we call them sideline buyers, not just buyers sitting around waiting for interest rates to drop because who knows when they are. But you've also got sellers that have gotten into houses with these incredible interest rates, and they're just not wanting to go anywhere anytime soon.
No.
And the sellers that aren't in there with the best interest rate are thinking, wow, my buyer pool's small. Why would I put my house on the market right now? Because there's not a lot of buyers out there because of the interest rate. So I truly believe that there's not really a panic. I don't think it's a panic at all. I think it's just everybody trying to just be cautious and make the right decisions. But if you look at the market and look at the statistics, I mean, the folks that are putting their house on the market, the sellers, they're selling their houses. I mean, inventory is continuing to stay low. That's not just because people aren't putting their house on the market. That's because when they do, they're having to price it right, and people aren't going, bidding wars and people going, 20, 30% over list. But at the same time, they're out there and they're selling. You get it priced right, get the condition right, and they're selling. So I don't personally see a panic at all. I just think you're seeing folks cautious. But I will say, and then I'll turn this over to Kimberly, that I think you're about to see something coming with spring and summer. I really do. I think spring and summer is definitely, that's when folks put their house on the market and everybody gets all, super excited about, selling. They want to know if they're changing schools and where they're going to be, and they want to do it, all these kind of different scenarios in that. And I don't have to explain that to anybody. We all know that the market is hotter during the spring and especially the summertime. So
yeah, I don't think we're seeing panic necessarily. We are in the South, so said with love and grace. I think we're seeing a lot of hard-headedness, between buyers and sellers, and that
I
makes
say caution, you say hard headed. I like yours better.
yeah. Sometimes they're hard-headed. So no matter what the market is telling us, the sellers don't want to let go of it's a seller's market. The buyers aren't wanting to let go of the fact that it's a buyer's market, and so they're just kind of butting heads a little bit. And houses are staying on the market a little bit longer. So I just think it requires a little more patience for the sellers. And in Alabama, it was very cold this winter and rainy, and that all of that affects buying. So it's not panic, but I think it just requires a little more patience. And it requires good agents and good companies like yours that make sure that your house looks right and is competitively priced. And I think that, it just makes people rely more on professionals. And kind of like the NAR settlement did, it separates the boys from the men. And, you just have to know how to play the game.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one thing that you see, and you see this with most market real estate cycles, is the ebb and flow of real estate agents. And that's why it's so, when you're trying to pick a real estate agent, whether or not you're buying an investment property or one for your own personal residence, yes, please always ask, like, hey, how many market cycles have you gone through? How many real estate cycles have you gone through? Because you guys have been through a ton. And being able to speak to, say, whenever there's a boom, there's a ton more real estate agents out there. And then we've seen with the NAR settlement and interest rates, I think they're like a total of 2,500 less now in the central Alabama area.
Right.
I mean, that's, and we're a small market, right? So 2,500 is a significant amount comparatively speaking.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I say 2,500, and then some of our listeners who are in Atlanta, and they're like, "Well, that's
they're like, oh,
that's
that's
less than 2%."
just like 1%.
It's like, well, it's actually more like 20%.
20 to 30, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, the market cycles that they do ebb and flow, but currently, right now, you're just not seeing the sellers want to lower their prices. Is that what you're saying? Like that they're just still wanting the competitive, sell fast, kind of still in that behavior, whereas the buyers are a little bit more apprehensive.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing a lot more price reductions in the Birmingham area, but I don't think that was necessarily a reflection of our market. I think it was the sellers wanting to price their property high when the agent went to list their house. So I think that was a lack of a good consultation.
Amen. Amen. Literally took the words out of my mouth.
Right. And I think that comes from, like I said, hard-headedness. The sellers wanted to price it high. The buyers thought they can negotiate more. So the days on market are a little bit longer. We are seeing more price reductions, but that came from pricing it incorrectly to begin with.
Yep. And I think, honestly, I'll chime in on that for 1 second. We've said this already, and Lindsay said it as well. I mean, it's the importance of A, having that relationship, and B, doing that consultation, like knowing that you need, being a buyer or seller, that you need to be working with, a real estate agent, or once again, a company like yours or something like that. You just need a professional involved. Stay in your lane and get their advice, and then you'll know exactly what to do. And I think if folks were doing that, I think it would be a lot better. But I mean, the other side of that is some sellers just aren't putting their house on the market because they're waiting around, like I was mentioning earlier. So sometimes it's not as much about just pricing it too high. It's about, the fact that some are just waiting around, just like those sideline buyers. You got sideline sellers.
But there's a cost of that. There's a cost.
100%.
There's a cost of waiting. And that's what we try as educators and as realtors. We try to talk to our sellers about that and our buyers about that. You can wait for the interest rates to come down, but while you're waiting for the interest rates to come down, the market is going up, and it balances things out. And so I think that that's really important for people to know. And I don't think the fact that you're seeing a lot of price reductions in Birmingham, I don't think that should scare investors off by any means.
Yeah, no.
It's just the market correcting itself. And when the
Mhm.
market does, there's always a few little pain points that can be easily overcome if you just dive into the market and have great conversations with agents and companies.
Yeah. And I think with investors, we were talking about this earlier. I think with investors, one of the things you see is that the market changing doesn't really affect them, in my opinion. I truly believe that. Like, we can have a boom and then we can see the dip and then we can have the real estate market do this, this, and this. But the investors, if they do it right, it should just be just like that all the way through, because they're not always getting loans, so they're not always worried about interest rates. If they are getting them, there's private money, there's creative financing, there's a lot of different things out there that, as long as you're, working smarter, not harder, that you can find those deals. And once again, partnering up with a company like yours and good agents and things like that. I think that world should never slow down. I really do.
It's so funny, all of his hand motions. He just goes across my face like this all the time. It's like there's a plane going by.
But it's in front of your face. It's not actually in your face.
We're sharing an office space today, talking about shared office spaces. But no, that's actually how I started working with investors a long time ago. When the market took a downturn, and a serious downturn, the buyers weren't buying, but that was the best time for investors to buy.
Amen.
And so as agents,
Absolutely.
you just do it. And historically, still, just real estate's the best long-term investment that you can make. So you can always make investments work for you, whether it's buy and hold or whether you're flipping or, whether you've got tenants. You can always do that. There's just never a bad time to invest.
Amen.
Being in the real estate industry 20 years, both of us around 20 years, we were talking the other day, if I only knew now what I know.
I know now. Right.
I bought up so many properties. I mean, it's just like I kick myself constantly. So yeah, I'm glad I've been in the market, been in the business for 20 years. But if only I had bought one house a year, where would I be today?
Exactly.
I know. And it's
Woulda, shoulda, woulda. Hindsight.
shoulda. I've thought that. It's like, man, if only I'd had the capital.
Yeah.
When we started that we do now, or that me personally that I do, if only we had bought when it was lower. And I love that you said that, Kimberly, too, because when it comes to investors, if you do listen to this podcast, you've heard me say it about 700 times that please don't wait on the interest rates or anything like that. If the numbers work, if the deal works, jump on the deal, because that property is going to continue to appreciate. 80 years of data proves this. It's just what the market is going to continue to do. So as long as you just sit there and wait and sit on the sidelines, because you're like, well, I'm going to wait on this to happen. I'm going to wait on this to happen. Well, the second the interest rates drop, what happens to the sales price? They shoot up. And so it's going to offset that, and that cost is going to be more expensive to you.
It is. And say it's a house you love. You've lost that house by then anyway.
Right.
And that's why you just got to act, and then just, refinance later or whatever. We've all heard it, and we said we weren't going to say it, but I'll say it, not because we're saying it because it's not ours, but we've all heard date the rate, marry the house, right?
Exactly.
It's out there. And as much as we don't like putting it that way as real estate agents, we just don't, at least I know we don't. Conceptually what that means is, what we just talked about is, as you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, the price is going up and up and up and up and up. But not only that, it probably won't be available,
Right.
So I told him, I was like, if you say date the rate, I'm like, that sounds like such a dad. When we teach CE classes, he's got a list of dad jokes he goes around. But that is very, very true. And if I only knew then what I know now,
again,
working, I mean, I've worked with a lot of investors, but investors have taught me a lot of things. There's so many ways to structure deals now.
Right.
There's so many ways to finance, and I mean, just so many avenues if you will just dive in and try to figure it out. And of course, the numbers have to work, but there's so many ways to get things done.
Well, and
that I never knew. Creatively, that I never knew about.
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go back to hot topics for a second. I mean, how to best work with investors. I mean, would be a great topic and should be a hot topic, even if it's not. because I think the importance of what I mentioned earlier about the relationship, but at the same time, you're going to learn from each other. And there's things that investors know that, real estate agents should know. There's things that real estate agents knows that investors should know. And I think if we all just work together and stay educated about everything that's going on, I mean, shoot, smooth sailing.
And I think also you have to be a little open-minded, whether you're investing, whether you're agents, you have to be open-minded. Wholesalers, that's another thing. A lot of flippers get deals from wholesalers, and a lot of agents were just totally didn't know what to do to do about that. But a lot of wholesalers in different states are now highly regulated. But that's one thing that's a little bit different is all the wholesalers that we're working with now. And the other thing is about creative financing. I have a deal right now on the MLS, and it's an investor who had several investment properties, but he's wanting to only offer it owner finance. And he had talked to several agents about that. But I had to talk to him and just, instead of just saying, no, I'm not taking that listing because you don't want to do FHA or VA or USDA. I was like, tell me why, tell me more. I'm curious, and he was worried about, capital gains tax and different things like that. And he's very well educated in the investing industry, but he thinks like way outside the box. But where I used to be scared of that 10 years ago, now I'm kind of intrigued by that. Tell me about this. But the other thing is, he only wanted to offer his home to a homestead home buyer. But then all of these investors, kept coming up and wanting to make offers and tell me more. And he really wanted to help a home buyer that was in, a different kind of situation. And you just have to be open to it. And if you just shut people down and just think that you automatically know more than they do, you can learn a lot of things from a lot of people. So I just try to keep an open mind, and sometimes some crazy things come about. And now it's kind of blowing people's mind in our local MLS, and agents are calling me and, tell me, what's the interest rates? What's the terms? What's this? And I have to tell them it can vary. I mean, they may offer $2,500 down. They may offer $10,000 down. He said he would owner finance it for 20, 30, 40 years.
Wow.
He can make it work for someone. I know. And I mean, it's just a little odd, but I'm like, I'm hanging in there thinking, what can I learn from this? Because it's going to behoove me to know these kind of things. And it's, it's just very odd. And I was like, why not investors? Because investors, this appeals to a lot of investors. A lot of, investors will do something like that. And he said, well, I'm not opposed to it. If the numbers work, like you were saying, then we'll do it. But he said, I don't think the numbers will work, but hey, we can try. And so,
I mean, but you're absolutely right. There's no one way to make a deal work.
Right.
There's not one way to structure a particular deal. And there's usually a way forward. There is typically a way in which
there is
the deal.
And the key she hit is she asked the questions. She asked the right questions.
Yeah.
And that's how it always works. Because if you sit there and shut somebody down or just make assumptions and things like that, you're never gonna find it. You would have never gotten as far as you did. So,
well, I've just seen so many deals that could be deals fall apart because an investor will come to someone and they'll say, we can make it work. Here's your offer. It's one of three ways that you can that I can buy this house, and then the home buyer or the home seller, if they don't have an agent, they're like just blown away. But just lean in and see what you can learn from situations, because there are win-win situations that can be created from deals like that. But you have to be able to wrap your head around it. And some people are willing to do that. Yeah.
So speaking of, really quick, my favorite, not really a dad saying, my favorite real estate saying is, the date the rate. I love that one. It's very, very true and speaks to kind of what we've been going through. But it is timing the market is not near as important as time in the market. Yep. That one's my favorite.
That's
That's
good.
my
No, it
personal
is. I
favorite.
love it.
Yeah.
I love
It's
that.
good.
Kimberly, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Before we leave, before we wrap, like, do you want to leave us with any other tidbit information about real estate, just in general, or real estate investing, with the audience?
Probably nothing that has gone unsaid, but just real estate. I wish I had invested much more so long ago. It's always a great time to invest. It's always a great time to buy real estate.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's my only thing. It's just nothing to be scared of.
Mhm.
I mean, I drove I'll drive a car for 200,000 miles because that depreciates in value. I take it as a competitive thing.
Right.
So, but before cars, before shoes, before clothes, I'm buying real estate, and I think that your audience should too, because you can leave a legacy with that.
Yeah.
It's not just smart. You can leave a legacy, and the most millionaires in America, I think, it's all because of real estate.
Amen.
It's not
Yeah,
because of
Amen.
absolutely.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It
because of
is.
AI.
It is. You know, the
Exactly. Well,
majority of millionaires, their substantial amount of their wealth is tied to some form of real estate or property, land.
no,
That is just a fact. This is not us on a podcast trying to sell
that is
an investor a
actually
particular property.
that's actually what got me in the business a million years ago. Is my dad was sending me when I was younger to all these little success series and these little conventions and different things that were coming to town, and all these people that were talking about like success and leadership and sales and all these things. Every one of them, their background was real estate. Every single one of them.
Yeah,
So,
I've always told my daughter, she's like, I want to be an influencer. I want to be a movie star. You know what? She's in real estate and
amen,
she's investing. We have an
amen,
LLC
amen.
because that's the way to wealth is just investing.
Yeah, it
She still
is.
kind of wants to be an influencer, but the way to wealth is real estate.
So my final 2 cents, since you asked. So I want to go back to what I said very quick: the importance of relationships. I think that is very, 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 very important. Learning from each other, developing relationships. But the other thing is, and how you find these relationships is just get in the room, get in the right rooms, put yourself in position to be successful and to learn these things and meet these people. That's what it's all about. You can't just sit in your little corner and do your own thing. Get out there, meet folks. Like I said, get in the right rooms. That's what I would leave it with.
He can work a room. Lindsay knows that. He can work a room.
I do know that. I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. Absolutely.
I
Well,
love it. I love it. I love it.
It's been a
Jason,
pleasure.
Kimberly, thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And that's it. That's On the House with Spartan Invest.